Welcome to For the Long Run, the podcast exploring the why behind what keeps runners running long, strong, and motivated. I'm your host, Jonathan Levitt. Through personal and professional connections in the running world, I have the privilege of getting to know some amazing athletes. I've always been fascinated by the psychological aspect of running, and this podcast is aimed at exploring this and much more. I hope you enjoy. This episode is sponsored by Janji. Janji is a local to Boston running apparel company dedicated to exploring, connecting, and giving back through running. Inspired by travel, informed by function, and built for adventure, Janji makes running essentials to equip you wherever you run or roam. The company was founded on the core belief that water is a human right and donates 2% of their sales to supporting clean water organizations around the world. I've known the two co-founders of Janji for over 5 years, and it's been a privilege to see them grow and increase the level at which they've been able to give back to the running community and to the world in general. This episode is also brought to you by UCAN, a sports nutrition product that I love. They're having their Cyber Week sale right now. Head over to UCAN at ucan.co to take advantage of their biggest sale of the year. The code FTLR has been upgraded to 30% off site-wide. Now's the time to try something new. Welcome back. I have Tina Muir joining me on the podcast. Tina, did I get that right?
I'd give it a B+.
So how do you say it?
I say
we were
Muir.
Just talking about
yeah,
this.
we were just. I know this is not exactly the probably intro that people are used to, but I say Tina Muir. I mean, this is not science. I do speak in English, the English language. You know, yeah. I feel like my name is really not that complicated, but I can feel the stress coming out of you. So I say Muir, but for the Americans listening, it's Muir. That's what Americans say. So you can go with whatever, but you've said it now, so it's done.
Yes. So next question is who is Tina?
Do you miss the last name? Was that intentional, or do you always do that?
No, I always do that.
Okay. All right. Well, Tina is actually Christina, just to complicate things further. But who am I? I really wasn't ready for that question. I am, I would say, a mother, a wife, a podcaster, a founder, someone who I hope lives to their truth and speaks from the heart. And I am someone who shares probably too much, but feels that is the best way to connect with people, which is something that you and I definitely share in common.
Yeah, and I think that's why we've connected over the years, and we both enjoy each other's company and conversations so often. I think
you've met my mom. Not many people have done that.
Yeah, I've met your mom. We had food at cafeteria on Newbury Street prior to the Boston Marathon last year, and that was super fun. We've both enjoyed asking the question, how are you doing, and expecting something more than just good. And every time one of us replies good, we know that person is currently short on time, and that the other should expect a more detailed answer coming soon. So my next question is, how are you doing?
I actually had Glennon Doyle be asked this question the other day. I can't remember whose podcast she was on. Michael Gervais, I think. And she said her answer was everything. And I was like, that's so perfect, because it is. And that, I think, I mean, anyone who says good or fine or okay is kind of lying a little bit right now, because I don't see how in the world that we're in you could be just one of those. You might be one of those for a minute, but in your life, as you look at it as a whole, there's so much going on. So I would say I'm excited about things. I'm stressed about things. I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm feeling thankful. It's just everything. I feel like Glennon Doyle summed that up so perfectly, that there's, depending on the minute, and then just looking at my life as a whole in this situation that we're in, I feel like you can't sum it up in one word. I mean, at least I can't, and I know you can't.
Yeah, I love that. I think I'm going to have to start using that. It's like the perfect epitome of like, yeah, there's a lot going on right now, and some of it's good, as we talked about, and some of it's a pile of trash. And we have to appreciate the good stuff, and then work on the other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So we originally connected while you were running at a competitive level, I don't know, 5 years ago, and you said, I want to be the best, I want to be my best. Help me do that, basically. And we got to know each other professionally through working together via Insight Tracker. But I've gotten to know you as more than just Tina the athlete, and I really appreciate how multi-layered you are, and again, how much you care. So given that this is initially a running podcast, let's start there,
Mm-hmm.
and use that to lay the framework of what we're going to talk about for the next hour or so. So a question that I like to use to dive into this is, do you remember your first run?
No, I definitely don't. I remember doing cross country. Like in England, you do rotations of sports in P, or it might have changed now, but when I was in school, you did rotations. So you do volleyball for 8 weeks, and then you do basketball for 8 weeks, and cross country was one of the the classes, which obviously was the one that 99% of the class hated the most. Therefore, I felt I needed to hate that the most. But I remember running cross country in school, but I couldn't tell you which one of those was first. So no.
Well, why did you keep doing it?
Well, because they made me twice a week for that 8 weeks. But no, we did do that. But I've told the story many times before that I didn't want to be on the cross country team. I hid in the bathroom so I didn't have to be on the team. But I honestly, looking back on that now, I feel like I must have been somewhat near the front of my class in cross country. But I honestly think if I look back, it was probably a case of everyone said that running wasn't cool. I remember specifically it made my face red. So I probably didn't like that either. But I would imagine it was probably the social aspect of being a teenager who wanted to fit in and not wanting to, I don't know, cross country to ruin that for me, I guess. Yeah, I'm not sure.
And at what point did you realize that you were probably better than your peers at it, or you sort of alluded to it, but did you have that specific, like, wow, I am at the front of the pack, I am beating everyone?
No, I've said that I don't. This kind of feels like a bit of a blackout situation where I remember hiding at the tryouts. It wasn't really called that, but let's call it that for simplicity's sake. And then I remember being on the team. So somewhere along the line, I must have ended up at the front of my class or near it. And my PE teachers said, right, you're on the team now, whether you like it or not. But I remember specifically finishing 4th in a race. And I think that was the moment one of the teachers pulled me aside and said, you need to get to a club. You need to find a coach. Because in England, it's not like here where my PE teacher was the cross country coach, but he was also the one that was the cross country coach was also the basketball coach and the football, like soccer coach and the field hockey coach. So he definitely had any expertise in running. So when you kind of are picked out to have some talent, they send you to find a local club, which would mean meeting in the evenings at a track near you. And that's where I met my coach, Brad, who was my coach for probably 6 years, maybe. Yeah. And he was the one who kind of made me see that I had a talent and made me get excited about it. So it was a bit of a strange path there, and definitely different to how things are in the US, but pretty typical for England.
And so in between that and running a marathon in the 2:30s, what did that time look like? How did you go from hiding and not wanting to run to running that fast and that far?
Well, the first thing to say is the first few years I was still hiding. I was on the team and I do the races, But if I had to run away from the track, like let's say I had a evening run on my own, I would run in the dark. I would run wherever I thought people couldn't see me. And if one of my school friends said the next day, "Oh, I saw you out running," I remember being so embarrassed. And do you want to know the funniest thing, which is just so ironic now? I hated the idea of my friends seeing me in running clothes because I thought that was so embarrassing to be wearing running clothes. And now I look down and I'm wearing running clothes, and I am not running today. I haven't run in 8 days. But I remember being so embarrassed to be seen running. So that kept with me for quite a long time until I think I reached a level where I don't want to say I had a bit of swagger, but I was like, just felt like it was a more, rather than being a nerdy running thing, it was my peers saying, "Wow, she's actually really good." So I trained with this coach of mine and worked my way up till my senior year of high school. I finished 16th in England at the National Cross Country Championships. And that was where you started getting attention from running universities from American universities that wanted you to come there to run. That said, while I was doing this, I was also living a double life because still, you asking this question is really making me see this like in the face, but it's making me, I still wanted to be with my friends. So I was actually going out drinking quite a lot while trying to run. And thankfully I didn't end up injured because my coach was really, really adamant. He was not going to push me. He said, "I want you to be a runner for life. I want you to have the best years of your running when you're older. I do not want you to use them now." So by him not pushing me, my body was able to somewhat handle going out to drink 1 to 3 times a week and running at the same time. But that said, after that year, I was kind of fed up with running. I think because I was burned out of trying to live that double life. And I ended up coming to the US sorry, this is a bit long-winded, but I came to the US for a year before I started university. Went to California, spent 8 months there, loved it, decided I did want to go to school out here. But my visa got denied. So my world fell apart. Like, I don't ever remember crying as much as I did when I found out when my visa got denied. But then it ended up being a blessing in disguise because then another university in America in Michigan came around and said, "Try again. You can do this. We are confident that you'll get this visa." And somehow I feel personally like I begged, like almost hands and knees, begged the customs woman or the immigration woman to let me have this visa. I don't know if it was that or if I just felt like I was begging, but she let me go. Then I went to university over here. And then that's kind of where the rest of it came together.
So then that led to being a sponsored runner. And what was that process like initially?
And that's where, again, England and America kind of just go apart a little bit. In England, if you make it past age 18 to 20 when you're going out partying, you're a runner for life. There is no drop off after college. There is no, I have to go find sponsorship. It's you run through university and then you continue. Like, it's not, I'm going to make the decision to go pro or not. You're just doing it. Whereas here, because of the university system, there's a massive drop off from people when they finish college. If they run in college, a lot of people are so burned out that they are like, "I'm done with running." But there's also the monetary aspect of things that here, if you take money, if you want to run at college, you cannot have taken money in any prize money or anything like that. And so the decision to go pro is you basically saying, "I'm going to accept money now." Whereas in England, there aren't really those rules. So you could accept money anytime while you were in college, as far as I know. And so it had never occurred to me about this whole going pro thing It was just, I finished university, so I was going to keep running. Of course I was. So that's where I was at. I was at a level where I think I'd run 33:24 in the 10K and 16:08 in the 5K, which wasn't blazing fast, but definitely showed potential. So I was actually working as an assistant coach at LaSalle University in Philadelphia while I got my master's. So running was I put the most attention on it I could as I started training for the marathon. But that said, it wasn't what I would consider the ideal lifestyle, trying to do, going to my master's classes from 6 to 9, 4 days a week, and then being an assistant coach and trying to do my training. But I did the best I could. And it was the best. Yeah, I gave all I had for that period of time.
So this podcast is aimed at exploring the why, and I find the steps in your journey to be fascinating because you just kept going and you just kept doing it. And initially it seemed like you were doing it just because it was, something to do, you were forced to do it. But then at some point you realized you were good at it and you were enjoying it. So when you were at LaSalle and spending all this time in so many different areas, do you remember why you were running? Or what would get you out of the door?
I think then I see, I'm trying to think, because somewhere along the way I lost my why, and we can get onto that in a minute. But I don't think it was at that part. I think at that point it was because I had shown a lot of potential in long runs in college. I'd always loved my long runs, and I'd done up to 17, I think maybe even 19 miles in my long runs. And I loved the idea of challenging myself. There was nothing I enjoyed more than being out on one of those long runs. Someone might call it a progressive long run now, but in college doing that, there's nothing I love more than that. I actually liked to run away from the guys, get a 5-minute head start on them, and then see how long I could hold them off. They had me in their vision. I had them in my rear view, and I loved the thrill of being able to keep ahead of them. So I would say it was challenging myself. But then, that's a good question, because I don't know at that point whether it was because I still had that recognition aspect of things, and that going through this conversation is making me see that for all those years I just wanted approval. It was other people's opinions. So even then, I think when I was in college, I loved the idea of being able to say, I'm doing my master's and I'm working and I'm running at this level. So I think a lot of it was my why was trying to stand out, trying to be good enough. If I'm honest, I don't know if that's what you see from me saying it, but as I'm looking into it myself, I think that's what's kind of coming out here.
Yeah, when you explain it that way, I guess it makes sense. Did it shift at any point in your professional career?
You mean in a good way or a bad way?
Either, yeah.
Unfortunately, I would say that as my professional career went on, I got more and more into the metrics, the numbers, the finish lines, chasing that high of running faster, beating a personal best, getting a goal, things like that. I'd had a goal from being from 14 years old, from when I kind of finally accepted that I was a runner that wanted to do this and I was good at it. I'd set a goal of running for Great Britain, and that I finally achieved at age 28. But once that carrot was gone, I really, really struggled to motivate myself. So I don't even know if I could say that carrot was my why, because I feel like even that isn't the reason that I would have got out of bed. I don't know. Would you say that's a reason, having a goal that took that many years to get to? I'm not even sure.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. So I ask this question all the time. on the podcast to try and understand the process versus outcome dependency of an individual. And it ranges from a professional athlete saying, when I asked her, well, fast forward 10 years, what are you proud of? She couldn't put a tangible outcome out there. It was simply, and I mean that in a good way, it was simply, I want to be better. If I get a podium, if I make the Olympics, if I this, if I that, great. Her specific goal was, how good can Vanessa be? And that's all the way on one side of the spectrum. And then on the other, we have, like, my own example. I was so focused on BQing and running sub 3, and I failed I think 4 times in a row, or 3 times in a row over like a 2.5-3 year period. And it didn't finally happen until I was able to disassociate the outcome from the result. I stood on the start line. I didn't care what was coming next. It was a celebration of 2 years of training. And on that day, I ran 2:59.
And it works like that.
It was fantastic, but I would have been happy with a 3:01. Or
can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
When you look back on those, what you said, failures of trying 4 times, what do you view those as now? When you look back on those 4 times now, what do you see them as?
Yeah, they're stepping stones. In the moment, they were failures. I ran a 4:01.
And you said that, like, this is a failure. Did you say that to yourself?
I don't know if it was like that black and white. In my head, it was a failure. That 4:01 in particular, I did everything that I tell people not to do, like literally everything. And that was a failure of, like, not listening to what I knew to be correct. It was hot. I'd gone into it with, it was Boston 2017. And Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I would come home with 30,000 steps on my Fitbit. And it felt like I did 3 long runs in a row. And then Sunday happened. And then Monday was the race. And it was like my legs were trash by 10K. And then it was hot. I didn't adjust. I was, this and that. And like I said, everything that I knew to be the right move, I did the opposite. I ran Philly in 2016. I went out with a 93-minute first half and finished with a 3:20. So I added, 15 minutes in the second half. And then the one race before that was Boston 2015. I didn't look at my watch once and had the time of my life. But 6 weeks prior to that one was another BQ attempt, and I ran 3:27. And again, I ran a 94-minute first half. So I kept having these, like, colossal blowups in from miles 15 to 18, or at Philly it was like almost 20. And I didn't really learn from them, now that I think about it, because I kept just saying, like, I'm fit. I should, like, I thought the marathon owed me.
Yeah, like this
Peter
wasn't meant to
Bromka
happen
always
this
says,
way.
Yeah, Peter Bromka always says the marathon doesn't owe you anything. And I think it was him that said that. And I would go into those races disrespecting the distance and overhyping my own ability. And maybe I had the fitness on a perfect day, but I don't think that I learned my lesson until Boston 2017, where the race chewed me up and spit me out and said, like, basically, stop disrespecting me. I'm gonna teach you this lesson once and for all. And it was the most pain I've ever been in my life. Literally, I would run down Beacon Street, and it was faster. Anytime I go faster than 10-minute mile, my calves would seize and I would fall to the ground. And I think that for me,
go on.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, you finish what you were going to say, and then I'll ask.
Yeah, I was going to say, for me, it was like, that was the breaking point, and that was where I finally learned. Up until that point, those races were failures, and they were only failures because I didn't learn from them.
Yeah. Do you think there's anything that anyone could have said to you in after each of those races? Like for someone who's listening to this and is kind of deep down feeling that like knot in their stomach that this seems eerily familiar. But do you think you had to learn those lessons on your own with resulting in that final race of it all, yeah, like you said, all blowing up in the most spectacular way? Or do you think anyone could have told you anything?
I think the right person with a message crafted the right way, who I respected greatly, could have gotten it across to me. My coach wasn't able to. It was like, I don't know why I wasn't. That's a really good question. Honestly, I think I just needed to screw up and keep screwing up until a breaking point happened. And you know what it actually was? I took 25 months off of racing the marathon, and part of that was burnout, part of that was injury. Then I switched coaches, and I got into trail running, and like you said, I was too tied to the time and too tied to the watch. And I did a 50K. I ran a 7-hour 50K. In that there was a 5-hour marathon. Like, these numbers don't matter on trails. Why do they matter on the road? And I needed that massive change and break in order to come back and stand on that start line in Providence with like this shit-eating grin on my face. It was 50 degrees, it was drizzling, and I was like, I'm about to have a day. And I don't honestly think that I could have had that much fun in that race without those 4 I'm still going to call them failures, but stepping stones.
Yeah, that's a
really good question.
Yeah, well, thanks. It's good when 2 podcasters can sit here, because we obviously always have that mind working in the background. But it's interesting to hear that, and I think a lot of people resonate with that, especially if anyone is in that stage. And I wouldn't imagine there's too many people in that stage, because this year has forced upon everyone somewhat of a break. But I've been thinking a lot about my previous races where I viewed them as these spectacular failures, and I felt embarrassed afterwards to say how terribly I'd run. But now, not only then did no one else care except me, but now when I look back, I can't even remember those races. I can't remember hardly anything about even the time, where I finished, what the course was like, nothing. Because when you're in those moments, they feel so intense, and like you have screwed up in this way that you will have this marked on your gravestone for the rest of you, like, well, not for the rest of life, but it will be one of the defining moments of you. But yeah, when you look back, sometimes you don't learn from them. And for me, those ones even more blur into the background, because it was just a moment. But other ones you do learn from, and they do stick out in your mind because that lesson finally sunk in. So yeah, it's just interesting to hear you say that with those 4 races before. And I love that you did get to that race where you could finally just enjoy it. And I think this year has given people that time to have that disconnect, that almost like they're in a relationship with a version of running that is just treats them horribly and like abuses them. But then this year has forced them apart.
Break.
Yeah, it's been like a breakup.
I love that.
I think a lot of people have used it to be like, okay, I've always said I wanted to do a speed second. I'm going to do it. A speed segment. I'm going to do it. Or I've always said I wanted to do trails. Why not try? And I think that's been so cool to see people just trying different things, or at least being forced into breaking their rhythm on the routine of full marathon, spring marathon, full marathon, spring marathon. Yeah. So it's been pretty cool.
I have like 50 follow-up questions, but I love everything you said there. The first one, do you remember what was the most memorable race? You said you can't remember a lot of those, but what was the most memorable?
In a bad way.
In a good way.
In a good way.
Yeah.
I mean, that race I ran for Great Britain in the World Championship, that sticks out to me. But even that, I only.
But was it because it was getting that was the goal, and
was the goal.
Like
yeah.
your goal was to get there, and the run there was the celebration of
yes,
getting the goal?
very much. It was a horrible day, like terrible day. I mean, on the video footage, you can probably still see it online. There's literal videos of Mo Farah and two other Kenyan guys running along the road, and you see a wind gust blow, and you see all three of them go like to the side and then come back here. Like, you literally see it on the TV. It was a horrible day. It was cold. It was windy, and not just windy. It was like not hurricane level, but it was very strong wind gusts. And I just went into it like I was going to enjoy myself. And I did. I was smiling the whole way. I had no expectations on me, and I just celebrated it. And I actually did pretty well, which was pretty good. But I think a lot of it was also that it was a tough day, and I didn't have that pressure of, oh no, I'm going to be cold, and it's so rough, and oh, my time's going to be slow, and all these other people are going to see me. All those things that I'd been battling with in every other race of my life were not there during that one, because it was a celebration. So I would say that one, but actually that one was more, of a celebration, and just almost a relief of, I've finally done it. Whereas I think the one that is the most memorable to me was the London Marathon 6 weeks after that, where I broke 2:40, which was the first time I'd done that, even though that had been my goal from marathon number 1, which I did not do that. Or 2. How many? Either did 2 or 3, I can't even remember, before I broke 2:40. But that one, I finally broke it, but I was having the time of my life. I saw friends all over the course. I was smiling. It was running in the London Marathon. The second time I'd run in it, actually. So it wasn't even the first time. But I just decided that I was going to enjoy myself. So that one probably sticks out as the most memorable.
I love that. The races as a celebration is something that I think we're forced to think about right now, because like nobody can race, or most people aren't racing, and we have races in 2021 as sort of like the carrot, and you can't run them if you don't train. So, or you shouldn't run them if you don't train. And it will essentially be the celebration or the culmination of this long break that we have to take. One of the reasons I was asking about what's the most memorable part, you shared it was this celebration. You shared it was the culmination of, getting to test yourself and getting there and achieving that goal. For me, what makes a race memorable and fun, or like the part that, I guess last year when I ran that marathon, that was the most memorable part, is like, it's like the unknown of riding that line. Like, how far is too far? Can we get to that line? And essentially, what's next? And I think that's where we learn so much about ourselves. And the reason that I can't say that those prior 4 were like big successes is because, again, I didn't learn from them. And I think I just like threw in the towel and didn't trust my ability enough. Like for 2 races or 3 races to fail that spectacularly after 2 hours in, I don't think it was physical. I think it was mental.
What were you saying to yourself in the second and third one, where it happened before, and you were mentally?
Like, I've been here. I was like, I was like, been here, done that. Like, this is about to get ugly. And I remember like very vividly at the Shamrock Marathon in 2015, I was at the half and I was like, great, 94 minutes. Bet I went out too fast. Like, this is going to be terrible. And mile 18 comes along and I run my first, like, I don't know, it was like 7:30 or slower than 7:15 or 7:30, whatever that time works out to be. I'm like, wheels have come off. And for me, it was like continuing to tell myself the wheels had come off. Like,
so like
this is going to be,
prophecy.
Yeah, exactly. So it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. Fast forward to 2019 and I hit the half in 87 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And my half PR is like 87 minutes. So I ran within a minute of my half marathon PR. Mm-hmm. And I was like, this is great. Like, I can't stop running 640s. And I was basically running by myself. It didn't make any sense because I was pacing very well in a fairly large race. I was like, where is everyone that's running sub 3 with me? And there were like 2 dudes, and that was it. And so I get to mile 18, and Shalane, I had spoken with Shalane Flanagan like the day prior to the race, and I get a lot of motivation from the way that she carries herself when it comes to racing. And it's a celebration. It's a chance to dive into the unknown. And what she said was essentially, I feel most alive in that moment when we're testing ourselves and we don't know what's next. Mm-hmm. And so I'm running along the ocean, unprotected, on like a bike path with the ocean on both sides. So it's windy. I'm by myself, and I'm probably 18 miles in, almost 20 miles in, and I'm like, this is it. Like, this is why we do it. I've never been here before and felt this good. It was only my 6th marathon, so like, go figure. Like, okay, it took 6 tries to go well, but then I started slowing down over the next 3 miles. And at mile 22, I made a very conscious decision. I was like, I've come this far. I don't know what's next, but I've never come this far, this strongly before. And
are you talking physical,
I'm not giving,
mental, or both?
Both, like very much both. Mile 22, I did some, or at the 20 and 22 mile mark, I did mental math. I was like, if I run faster than a 7-minute mile from here on out, I'll run under sub 3. And I was like, don't screw up now. Like, you've come this far. And so my splits, I hate talking about splits and paces and whatnot, but in this marathon, the splits tell the story. Mm-hmm. I had run remarkably consistent up through like 14 to 15. Then I slowed down. Then I slowed down a little bit more, and then I sped up. Mm-hmm. And my coach said he was looking at the splits. He's like, nobody is gonna come back from this. Like, I've never seen it. And at mile 23, I was at the bottom of a hill, and I said, "This is it. I'm not giving up now. Let's go." And I accelerated, and it finally happened. And so I think that, and now I'm rambling, but
no,
I think it was that conscious decision of, I've never been here. This is why we do it. Let's find out what's about to happen. And this is going to hurt a lot. Mm-hmm. And it did, and it was great. And then I screamed in the volunteer's face, who handed me the medal as I broke 3. I was like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." But that was the most like exciting moment, because it was not about the time on the clock. Mm-hmm. It was about getting to the start line, and then that conscious decision of, I'm not giving up this time. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's see how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that is I mean, this part is definitely relevant to a lot of people, a lot of runners out there, of when you finally can reach that point where you're prepared to, like you said, go for it, and this is it. You're removing all excuses. So at the end of this, you're going to have to face this. You're going to have to take that leap of faith that things are going to work out, and be brave, because that's scary. And I honestly don't know if we can do that. I feel like when you get into the sport of running, there's this initial period of where you have that. And then somewhere along the way, we all get tangled up in numbers and what other people think, and just the pressure of having to be better. Maybe it's around when we plateau or something. Like, we somewhere along the way get tangled, and then somewhere else along the way, we decide, you know what, I've had enough of excuses. I've had enough of saying, oh, well, this happened and that happened. I'm going for it. Kind of the effort moment. And you obviously reached that point where you made that decision. And sometimes I think it is not even so much an effort, I'm going to dig as deep as I can. For someone like me, I think it was a moment of, I don't care what the outcome is. I just want to be happy in this moment. And that is where I had that in that London Marathon for me, because I said, F it, I'm enjoying myself. I'm running the London Marathon. This is a dream come true. Even though I've already done it before, I'm doing it. So I'm going to make the most of it and not just stare at the ground. So
yeah,
I think as runners, we have to go I kind of feel you have to go through that stage of being afraid and being unwilling to take the risk to get to that point.
It makes so much sense. Thanks again to Janji for sponsoring this episode. Janji Collective members will get a special discount over Black Friday and Cyber Monday. And as a reminder, you can join the Janji Collective for $50, where 100% of your fee goes to supporting clean water initiatives worldwide, and you'll always get a discount. If you use the code FTLR, you'll also get a free singlet. And now back to our conversation. One thing you said, you just want to be happy. So you ran that race, and then how soon after did you decide that was it for your career?
I had one more race, which was CIM in December. So that race was April, and in December I did CIM. But in the time in between that, I was struggling right away. I specifically remember doing Falmouth, which is in August, and all I kept hearing was, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. Like you were saying about your voice saying, like, your legs are already trashed, you're done. I was saying, I don't want to. And I was like, why am I thinking that? And I think I cooled down with Neely. And I told her, and she's like, oh, you'll get it back. You'll be fine. And I was like, I don't know, like something feels off here. But then I managed to get it back together for that CIM. But then after CIM, it felt like something had broken. Like I just couldn't get motivated. I had been asked by the London Marathon race team, whatever, to pace the lead British women through the halfway point of the London Marathon. And that wasn't motivating me. Even though I was going to make... I want to say I was going to make like $1,000 per... No, couldn't have been that much. I was definitely going to make a good chunk of money to do that. And then I had a race planned in Australia, in the Gold Coast of Australia. They were going to fly me out there, and that wasn't working. And that's when I really started to think something is wrong here, because I couldn't find any joy in any of the training. All I was thinking about was it being done, the finish lines, and how good it would feel to accomplish it. So that's when that why changed from I'd lost my why, because it just turned into, again, the end, the outcome, and I just lost all satisfaction from the training and the challenge. So I don't know what that meant, but I knew that it meant I needed to take a break and kind of have a break up with running for a while, potentially forever. I didn't know at that point.
And so what did you do next?
Was pregnant within 10 weeks. No, there's a bit more of a story, which I'd imagine most people listening know this, but
No, let's get into that story. I don't want to assume that people do.
Okay, cool. Well, I also throughout that time had been ignoring at the time it was amenorrhea, now it's called a red S, which I don't know if you've ever had that covered on the podcast, but does apply to men too.
Yeah,
red S.
Did a chat with Dr. Emily Krause on that one.
Oh yeah, she's amazing.
Couple of weeks ago at this point, but yeah, we dove deep into that. If people need a refresher course,
Emily's very knowledgeable. She's awesome and very fast. But yeah, so I had red S or amenorrhea, hadn't had a period in 9 years, and so I knew that for me, basically, I decided that people would always think I was a quitter if I just said, you know what, I'm done with running. Once again, following that social approval, I thought if I said, I want to start a family, no one could ever say, how dare you do that? That's so selfish. So for me, that was my cop out. And not that it was something I didn't want to do. I knew I wanted to be a mother. And we talked about actually a year later, we'd said the Commonwealth Games was 2018, and we'd said I would try to get on the team for that, and if that didn't happen we would stop. But this was a year prior, but I just decided to shift all my attention on becoming a mother, because it allowed me to deal with the health issue that I'd been ignoring for 9 years, and it also allowed me to have a reason to step away from running without people judging me, because I mean, I'm sure you've seen this and many of your listeners have seen this, that once it's changed now, but years ago, when a woman decided she was going to have kids, it was like, see ya, good job with your running, you're done now. And so that was when a woman decided to do that, people said like, all right, well, that part of your life is over, even though that's not necessarily the case. And even for me, I don't know if in 5 years' time, I'm 32, I could in 5 years' time decide I want to go for the marathon again. But right now, that's not the goal. But stepping away to be a mother was a pretty big decision. And so I feel like that was one way to satisfy that competitiveness in my brain, that I could then switch all my focus to that one thing, becoming a mother.
Yeah, and you called it a cop out, but I don't want to. I want to disassociate that from. I want to disassociate that from it. It feels like you brought so many other people along for the ride, and you helped so many people in your work with Tawny Gibson and Tawny Prazak. The two of you, with what you shared, both working together and your own individual stories, separately but equally, have probably contributed to dozens or hundreds of women having a better experience. So I would strongly urge you.
But that's what I saw it in my brain, was that I saw it. And that's the thing, another example of us being the way we view things compared to the rest of the world.
Well, the way I saw it was that it was like, holy cow, look at how raw and vulnerable you're being, and look at how many people are going to learn something that they might be struggling with, and they think they're the only person dealing with this. And so first, kudos to you for sharing that and bringing everyone along the way, and sharing what you learned. And second, it's exciting that it worked, and that you have a happy baby and growing child and all of that as well. And so as you got out of professional running and more into what you're doing now, the podcast has grown, your social presence has grown, your ability to communicate with others has transformed and sort of followed you in a way that I don't think it could have prior.
Yeah, thank you. It's I can tell I've been doing a lot of growing over the last few years, and it is kind of cool. I'm sure you're the same, even looking back a year ago,
Yeah.
to see how your thinking, especially this year, how our thinking has changed. And it can help you in those moments where you feel stuck or like everyone around you is moving faster than you are. If you look back, I love to journal or keep gratitude journals. And so I actually really like seeing where my mind was at. So I was pretty into that.
Yeah, it's super cool to be able to go back and look at that kind of stuff and see what you're appreciative for in the past and how it compares to now. So you are also a podcast host, as many people may have picked up on by your ability to ask me questions on this podcast, and it's always fun when that happens. So why did you start your podcast?
Well, I was the podcast host for Runners Connect has a podcast, which Runners Connect is like a training group online, and along with a few other things. And I was the host of the Run to the Top podcast for a few years. But this is interesting because I know this is something we wanted to talk about. Because it wasn't my brand, I felt like I had to be careful with topics. I had to keep it very light and talk about, I still did dive in probably deeper than I would imagine most did at that time, but I still felt like I had to be careful with topics and I had to keep it very just focused on the tips for running. Whereas I wanted to dive deeper with people. I wanted to get into that vulnerability and show the side of elite runners or dietitians or psychologists and ourselves, the part of everyone that your family might see or the person closest to you in your life might see, but the rest of the world doesn't. And I knew from being an elite runner myself that elite runners in particular were very good at showing this strong persona of look how easy everything is for me, when I knew from knowing them personally that was not necessarily the case, and they were struggling with the same insecurities that the 4.5 hour marathoner was, maybe in a different scale, in a different way, but it was there. So I really wanted to do that, but I couldn't do that under the umbrella of another person's business. So I decided that I wanted to do my own so that I could go wherever I wanted and talk about whatever I wanted. So yeah, that was kind of the main reason behind setting up Running for Real, and the name of it, For Real. I wanted to get to the real conversation.
Yeah, and I think that's been the genesis of this podcast as well. Like, I'm not interested in hearing
what you
like I commented on when I was talking about my own splits. I was like, I hate that conversation. I don't hate the conversation. I don't think that just talking about, tell me about there's a time and a place for it. Like talking about splits and paces and workouts and whatnot. But I don't think that that's what makes people interesting. I think it's how they approach a 16 by 400, or mentally what it's like to do a 17-mile cut down run, or be in the thick of marathon training and running 100 miles a week for, the 4 weeks leading up to a race, like stuff like that. That's interesting to me. The numbers are just supporting metrics. They're not the end all be all or the metrics that matter. So the goal of diving into these real conversations with people, I love it. 2020 has been quite a year for diving into real conversations. And I think the two of us have intentionally tried to have uncomfortable conversations. I was reflecting a little bit on my lack of that prior to this spring, maybe. And I think that it's necessary, just like in running, to get uncomfortable, to get uncomfortable in this medium as well. So can you talk about how you've approached 2020 from a podcast standpoint, from both choosing guests and also topics?
Yeah, I mean, I think like you, I also had a bit of I'd imagine many people listening, a bit of a wake up call with, wow, I have not been doing a very good job with this. I mean, I look at my own list of guests and I remember specifically trying to seek out people of color, but not getting a response. But instead of saying, okay, I need to try again, or I need to find someone else, maybe this person it doesn't use this channel, I would take it as an excuse and say, well, they don't want to, so I'm going to go to someone else. And I remember last year, about a year ago, I listened to Malcolm Gladwell's book, Talking to Strangers. And I started to, and that's kind of what awoke it for me with, I started thinking, wow, there is so many conversations that are not only left unsaid, but the whole premise of that book was that we are terrible at assessing people. We think we're good at reading people. We think that we're good at understanding conversations, but we're actually not. And so I started to look at myself in the way that I was approaching these conversations. And I've always liked to dive in deep with topics, but this year, really being shown it in the face, I decided that I wasn't going to be someone who checked the box and said, okay, all right, 1 in every 5 of my guests is going to be a person of color. Done. I'll post a black square on Tuesday. Done. I'll say, yeah, Black Lives Matter, hashtag Black Lives Matter. Done. I thought, you know what? I have to actually get in the trenches. I have to have these conversations where I start sweating. And I know you have done this too, where I have people on and I start sweating because I'm nervous I'm going to say the wrong thing, or I say something and they correct me, or I just put myself in a situation where this, the person I'm talking to's outlook and the way they've grown up in life is so different to what I would have experienced. Like Alexandria Will, who I had on my show, hearing her say that the only race in her life, or the only run in her life she has ever felt safe, was the Marine Corps Marathon because of all the security that is there. And for me, being a woman, I have had some more experience with running safety. But imagining not even feeling safe in any race other than that, it just made me think, wow, I really need to change. I need to listen. I need to stop saying, I know what to do and I am going to help these poor people over there who need help. Oh, bless you, that's so sad. Let me help you. But instead being like, I'm here, I'm listening, I want to learn. And that's it. And then shut up. It's been hard. And especially me, I'm like, you can sometimes get into rambles. But
Who, me?
Yes, sometimes. Although I would say I still win that section, even though I'm trying to work on it. It's hard to do, and it is uncomfortable. But I think with having a platform, having an influence, and especially you have a very busy life with the career that you have. I have 2 young children. I'm not going to be able to give up my Saturday every week to go join a protest or to do something that is maybe more meaningful. But what I do have is a platform. So if I can't use the one thing I do have and that is natural to use,
right,
then what am I doing? What am I going to say when my kids one day say, oh, when this was going on, what were you doing? I can't look back and say, oh, well, I used the hashtag Black Lives Matter and I made sure 1 in every 5 of my podcast guests was a person of color. Like I just feel that, I've got to do better.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I've found the balance between like doing more than just the bare minimum and trying to do things that don't feel performative. Yeah. And that don't feel that like make it a part of the routine versus like, yeah, posted a black square and blah, blah, blah. I was thinking about it yesterday. I was like, first of all, how ridiculous is it that we need to say Black Lives Matter? Like, have you ever thought about that? It's absurd. It should be a given. You see all these. I read something that a writer retweeted yesterday. It was like a New York Times article, and it was talking about a kid speaking with their father, I think, and the kid was like, well, what about before all these signs? Didn't these people care before all these signs? And it's like, how ridiculous is it that we're in a place where a person needs to see these signs to acknowledge that neighborhood is potentially a safe place for them? That's horrible. Mm-hmm. And that's the part that we need to change. And a conversation that I had with Adam Mary back in June, I want to say, was particularly poignant and on this podcast. And he was talking about, like, when he goes, he would consider himself mixed race. And he said, when I go to a race, I'm the only person that looks like me for the most part. And I'm like, I can't even imagine what that's like. And that's what needs to change. And so I think, I had a conversation with somebody else, and we're talking about essentially the fundamentals of marketing. The reason that you buy something is because you see yourself in the outcome or in the people using it, or you want to achieve the goal of how it's being communicated. So when you go to a race, a running race, and there's nobody who looks like you, why would you go back? Or what? How would you feel welcome there? So I think that as podcasters, it's our obligation. It's not even like you're good if you do this. Like, no, you must do this. And I'm honestly ashamed that it took me, I think it was like 60 episodes to have my first Black athlete on. I'm like looking back now, and I'm like, it's just embarrassing. So I think that like there's a lot of work to be done. And I appreciate you having these conversations. And when you said that about, like, entering conversation and sweating, that's what more people need to be doing. I think that just like in running, it's important to get uncomfortable, and growth only comes from discomfort. We're never going to grow as a society unless we're willing to have these uncomfortable conversations. And I don't think we've had enough of them. And one thing that I did, particularly around the election, was just like challenge people's opinions and ask for dialogue and conversation versus saying, you're wrong. Mm-hmm. Let me tell you why I'm right. That's not how it works. Nobody's ever going to grow, and nobody's ever going to improve if you are shoving your opinion down their throat. Like, I had fascinating conversations with people around the election who are undecided voters. I was like, could you imagine being an undecided voter?
Do you think they were actually undecided?
Yes. And if there's anyone listening that was, I would love to have a conversation with you. Please feel free to reach out. Again, this is not an attack. This is not a you're wrong, I'm right. This is we need to have conversations with people who look and think differently than you. I think that fundamentally that's what it comes down to.
Mm-hmm. I think something I'd love to hear a little bit from you about being a white male and what this time has been for you, as I very much get the sense that white males are going to become almost looked upon as a group. You, like, people like you, and I think about my husband, who, like, genuine good guys are going to be thrown in with a category and almost like things they haven't maybe. I mean, you've obviously benefited from the system. There's no denying that.
Oh, but, totally. Yeah.
Will be kind of I want to say just given a dirty look for being white male.
So I know what you're saying, and I don't care. Like, if that's going to happen, sure. The luxury that I have is I get to use that in a way that's productive. I think that being a white male in 2020 allows you to do things that need to be done. Like the other day, there was like a Twitter thread bashing a couple of Outside Magazine writers, and it was from somebody I've done podcasts with, who was sharing a link to an article with a dude that I have no respect for. And I took it upon myself to reply. I said, the writer of this article should think about how they speak. And they should think about how they're treating other humans. And they should think about how they are, well, that's about all I said because it was a tweet. But being in this position of privilege, like I can say those things with almost no repercussion. And if I don't do that, then I deserve to be lumped into like, whatever looked down upon means. David Roche, my coach, talked about being a bystander versus being an ally. And literally the easiest thing for me to do is to tweet my disapproval of somebody. But I did that once, and the person who was being attacked messaged me. It was like, I've been meaning to reply to this person, but I've never done it because I don't want to. This is a separate situation, but they were basically saying they didn't feel safe in doing that because of the potential repercussions. I don't feel like I have any of these repercussions. I have a very supportive employer who trusts me to do the right thing. I have a full-time job. Podcasting and social media is, I make money from it, but I don't need it per se. So if people stop listening or they say stick to running, like, so be it. If they stop listening, like, there's not a whole lot of negative repercussions that I have in standing up for somebody or standing up for something that I find to be important. So if I don't do it, shame on me and shame on people who are in this privileged situation and don't take advantage of their privilege in a good way. So yes, there's a whole lot that like I benefit from within the system, but then there are a whole lot of those things that I don't think that people are considering, that like you can use that power in a good way. Like, it's a shame that other people don't feel supported or able to speak in this way. So those that can must.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's a few things there. First, I want to say, for if you don't mind me just pitching one of my episodes, I just had an episode with a meditation teacher. His name's Oren J. Sofa, and he is incredible with the advice that he gives for how to handle difficult situations, particularly when family is involved. And so I would, if you wouldn't mind sharing that, it's just so good. But then beyond that, I think a lot about the fact that, we need to be able to say, yes, I am racist. I have racist tendencies. I am working on being anti-racist, but I'm still going to mess up sometimes. And being prepared to, like you said, not be a bystander and speaking up when you do see something that is wrong. But I also, to your point about you being in a safe place, I don't know if I really buy that with other people. I mean, in every situation, like if you are in your home and you have an uncle who says something racist and you just let it pass because you don't want to cause tension in the room, I mean, you're contributing. That's that is not helping our situation. You say people that say, I want to work, this needs to change. That's an example of something that someone can do in their own lives. Or like you said, online, maybe someone listening doesn't have a lot of followers, but you have you follow someone who you know personally who does say something. You need to be prepared to say something. And yes, even if that does mean risking or losing a friendship. I've been actually coming to terms a lot lately with some friendships that I feel have come to their natural end point because they aren't willing to have these conversations. And it's not like, get out of my life, I'm done with you. But it's kind of like, okay, I think our friendship has served this purpose. I'm really not comfortable with the bystanding that's going on here. I just want to surround myself by people who are prepared to do the work. And then onto people in our kind of situation. Yes, my part of my income and my livelihood depends on that money coming in. But I've found so many situations where I have said no to something that doesn't sit right in my gut, and not necessarily about systemic racism, but anything, something that feels, I just get that kind of like feeling like I'm walking the line of this doesn't feel right. Every time I've said no to that, something has dropped in my lap almost immediately.
You think that's karma?
I think part of it is more just, I guess it's kind of karma in a way, that it's you are being your authentic self. And yes, maybe that will push some people away or some opportunities away, but it will attract more of the people who are down the same path as you, who genuinely do care for those things. So a few weeks ago, I put up after Joe Biden was announced president-elect, I put a picture up of a tweet from Kamala Harris of something she said about little girls. And within an hour, I lost about 300 followers. And I don't really pay attention to that stuff, but I mean, that drop was pretty drastic. And so I thought first that provoked that like insecurity in me. Oh no, I've lost those people. Oh no, I'm upsetting people. But then, as you expect, that number came right back up. But this time I've collected people along the way who were like, who see Kamala Harris and what she's doing as something to be looked up to. And I'm not trying to tiptoe or keep those people happy by walking on eggshells and wording things correctly, because I don't want to offend them. But if they're not prepared, if I'm not speaking to them, they're not ready to hear my message or the message of other people, go find someone who does. I hope that in the future you will look to other people and learn and want to grow. But if you're not at that stage yet, there's no point you being here. So I feel, even if you do look at it from the livelihoods point of things, I personally feel like you should take a leap of faith with what matters to you. Even especially my biggest passion is the climate emergency, like sounding the alarm. And if the climate emergency, if I really care about that, that rules out a ton of opportunities for me, because I can't rightly work with a brand that is telling me I need to, go to buy a face cream that I need to change once a week, or buy a new jar that isn't recyclable, all that stuff. So, but for me, it's worth it because I'm speaking about the things that matter. And then, for example, with this, I get a stroller company reach out to me that it makes their product out of recycled materials. I mean, I never would have, like, that's a good example of that's not something I ever thought would be a thing, but they came to me because I speak my mind about climate change. So I just feel like everyone, no matter who you are, opportunities will come to you, but you have to be prepared to risk those people rolling their eyes at you, or people leaving you, or saying, oh, shut up, and then walking away. You have to be okay, thank you for your part in my life, but goodbye. Is that
Yeah. No, I think that's exactly it. I think that we all need to get, as we've been talking about, pressure makes diamonds, and no progress will happen if we just sit around and wait for somebody else to do it. I had a conversation with the VP of HR for my company in June. I basically said, I'm totally uncomfortable with XYZ. Most of it was my fault. And all of it was my fault. And her response, and she's Black. And so I was like, first, how do I have this conversation with you and be able to basically admit that what I've been doing has been the problem? And her feedback was basically, you can only control what you can control. And if you make small but consistent progress, that will work. And in a company of, she was like, basically, think about what you can do differently within your day-to-day, in your job. If everybody in the company did that, that's 75 people doing small things on a daily basis that leads to big progress. Look at running. One workout is not going to make you fit.
Yeah.
One long run is not going to make you fit. It's the stacking of every day of consistency. You might miss a day here or there. That's fine.
And you're going to screw up days as well, which same
exactly. Yeah. But it's the consistency and the brick after brick after brick that you lay that leads to something excellent. And if everybody does that, that's change.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's such a good point. And it's also that way, it's what we were talking about earlier about putting yourself, what is the goal here? Again, you could use it as the running analogy that, am I training towards, is this training or is this recovery day? Is this rest day? I know you're a big fan of, taking me one
rest
step
days are totally overrated. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely with you in that camp that I love rest days. Yeah, so for running, it would be: is this all taking you towards your goal? Yes, but in this situation, it's also back to you saying about the defensiveness, or the saying you're wrong, you need to do this. They're yelling at people. This isn't that. This isn't saying. Putting a Facebook post that's passive aggressive, saying people who believe this are stupid and you're all idiots. That's not moving you towards the goal. What is stepping back and listening and asking people gentle questions. And again, that goes back to that Oren podcast. Like, he just explained it so well about how to ask questions of like, what? So could you explain to me why it is you feel that way in a gentle tone, not saying like, tell me why you feel that way, but because the goal is to move us all to a more inclusive landscape and system. So that's the goal, not getting your point across. And so I think you're right that we need to keep that goal, and you can use the running analogy so well, in mind at all times.
Amazing. Tina, I could talk to you for hours, and I hope we get to have another long session like this sometime soon, hopefully in person. But thank you so much for sharing your story and diving into the community in general, and giving so much to so many people along the way. And I'm excited to share this one.
Yeah, thank you so much, and same to you. Thanks for all that you do and for speaking up on your platform as well.
Of course. That's it for today's episode. Like many long runs, it's sad when it has to end. I hope you join in next week on For the Long Run. And in the meantime, happy trails. If you've enjoyed this episode, it would mean a lot to me if you shared it so that others can find it and enjoy it too.